Boeing is being hit with its first worker strike in 16 years.
Say a 25% increase across the board on tariffs. Tit for tat from both sides.
So Boeing, big disappointment to me. Big disappointment.
The bond markets finally blew the whistle on Donald Trump's game of chicken with the stock markets. First, they were down.
He terrifies the Europeans.
Boeing is being hit with his first worker strike in 16 years. Say a 25% increase across the board on tariffs. Tit for tat from both sides. So Boeing, big disappointment to me. Big dis. The bond markets finally blew the whistle on Donald Trump's game of chicken with the stock markets. First, they were down. He terrifies the Europeans. It did not begin with a crash. It began with a cancellation. On the morning of May 7th, 2025, a quiet message was delivered to Boeing's executive floor in Chicago. The subject line was short: Ryanair withdrawal. But the consequences? Massive. Before we continue, hit that like button to help us beat the YouTube algorithm and to show your support. The message confirmed what Boeing's leadership feared most. Europe's largest low-cost airline, one of Boeing's biggest customers, had just suspended its next round of jet deliveries. Not because of safety issues, not because of performance, but because of price, specifically tariffs. And the blame was pointed squarely at the White House. In a letter later leaked to the press, Ryanair executives made it clear President Donald Trump's latest round of tariffs had materially altered the commercial terms of their Boeing agreement. And unless the cost was offset, deliveries would be frozen. That was just the first domino. By noon, 3 more airlines had made similar statements. A major Turkish carrier requested a pricing reevaluation. A Latin American customer asked to delay payment, and an African state-owned airline paused all new negotiations, citing price volatility driven by U.S. economic policy. Inside Boeing's corporate suite, panic was setting in, but it had been building for weeks. Trump's trade war was no longer a theory. It was a shock wave, a 25% tariff on all aircraft-related components, 145% on goods imported from China. No carve-outs, no exemptions, no warning. Even Boeing's closest allies had no idea the aerospace sector would be included. But it was, and it landed like a missile. CEO Kelly Ortberg, who only a few months ago had said he was not too worried about the administration's protectionist tilt, now found himself at the center of a spiraling crisis. At first, Ortberg played it cool. Back in January, he told Reuters that Trump was pro-jobs and Boeing was the ultimate American company, built in America, exported globally. The tariffs, he believed, would target foreign-built competitors, not Boeing. But that logic broke down by March. The tariffs Trump imposed were not targeted. They were sweeping, and when the European Union got wind of them, the response was brutal. The EU released a $100 billion retaliation list. Boeing's passenger jets were on it. Civil aircraft, once considered too strategic to touch, had just become a frontline casualty. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button to show your support to the channel. Ortberg's reaction was immediate. He convened an emergency board meeting and began lobbying Congress for an exemption. He warned lawmakers that the European retaliatory tariff alone could cost Boeing over $3 billion in lost orders by the end of the year. But his calls were not the only ones flooding Cap Hill. United Airlines, FedEx, Alaska Airlines. Every major U.S. airline called their representatives to beg for help. If Boeing was taxed more in Europe, the price of jets would go up. Ticket prices would rise. Cargo rates would spike. And worse, it would push carriers to consider Airbus. That was the real danger, not just tariffs, loss of market. At the same time, Boeing's supply chain began to fracture. Small suppliers in Canada halted shipments after a 25% tariff was slapped on landing gear assemblies. A German avionics firm paused production pending clarification on tariff rules. An electronics supplier in Japan pulled out of a long-term contract, citing unstable commercial terms. In the Carolinas, Boeing's Dreamliner plant began stockpiling inventory, fearing a logistics freeze. In Wichita, engineers were instructed to identify components with tariff exposure and source U.S.-based alternatives. Many of those alternatives did not exist. And in Toulouse, Airbus executives were making calls. Reports surfaced that Emirates had quietly reopened discussions with Airbus for additional A350s. Air India, previously in talks with Boeing for wide bodies, was now requesting updated pricing scenarios from both manufacturers. The message was clear: Boeing was vulnerable. But the retaliation was not just economic. It was political. France and Germany declared the U.S. tariffs economic sabotage. The European Commission confirmed that if a deal is not reached by July, Boeing jets will be hit with retaliatory duties as high as 25%. Airlines buying from Boeing would now have to pay more or demand that Boeing absorb the cost, and that cost was massive. Internally, Boeing estimated the average impact per aircraft at $3 million. On a 100-jet order, that meant a margin wipeout of $300 million. Worse, Boeing's hands were tied. Trump's administration had signaled no intention of reversing the tariffs. Trade officials told Boeing's lobbyists that American companies must adapt. But adaptation was not simple. Rare earth elements used in flight control systems, power electronics, and jet engines were now unavailable due to China's export ban. Without those materials, production would slow. In some lines, it would stop. And the competitors, they were circling. China's Comac was offering steep discounts. Brazil's Embraer, still recovering from a failed Boeing merger, was re-engaging customers in Africa and South America. Even Airbus, long locked in competition with Boeing, issued a rare joint statement urging the US and EU to de-escalate tariffs before the entire aviation industry was harmed. But it was already happening. At Boeing's Renton plant, overtime was cut. At the Charleston facility, hiring was frozen. Suppliers reported canceled contracts. One told Bloomberg, "We have 30 years of history with Boeing, but if this continues, we will go bankrupt." Inside Boeing's C-suite, divisions were growing. Some executives favored cutting prices to save contracts. Others insisted on holding firm and demanding exemptions. Ortberg was caught in the middle, trying to preserve shareholder value while navigating a political minefield. Congress offered no lifeline. A Senate bill to exempt civil aircraft from tariffs failed by 3 votes. House Republicans from manufacturing states demanded Trump lift the aerospace duties. The White House responded by threatening to double tariffs if Congress interfered. By May 7th, the pressure became unbearable. Ryanair canceled its next 3 deliveries. Not postponed, canceled. Delta quietly paused its 2026 procurement cycle, and Lufthansa signaled it would delay wide-body orders until tariffs are resolved. This was no longer a policy debate. It was a commercial implosion. At a closed-door investor meeting, Boeing's finance chief admitted that if tariffs hold through year-end, total revenue could drop by 10%. And if China retaliates further, that number could double. One board member reportedly said, "We are being sacrificed to make a point." And that point is now costing thousands of jobs. Across the U.S., layoffs began trickling in. A wing manufacturer in Texas cut 100 workers. A cabin supplier in Arizona announced temporary closure. A metal fabricator in Missouri shut down 2 shifts. The industry was hemorrhaging, and yet Trump remained unmoved. At a press conference, he declared, We are protecting American skies. If Boeing cannot adapt, someone else will. That someone increasingly looks like Airbus, or worse, China's Comac. Because as Boeing reels, customers are looking for stability. And in a world of tariff warfare, Boeing's position is becoming untenable. If this continues, the next major order may not go to Seattle. It may go to Shanghai. And for the first time in decades, Boeing's dominance is no longer a given. It is a question. And that question is still unanswered. Boeing's future is now hanging by a thread. What began as a political move has turned into a commercial catastrophe. With jobs on the line, global rivals circling, and the White House refusing to blink, the world is watching. What do you think? Is Boeing being unfairly punished? Or is this just the cost of America's new trade war? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into global power plays, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this story isn't over. Not by a long shot.